What's going on, everyone? It's been a long time, and there's so much to discuss. So let's do it. So I've been having some technical difficulties with some of my hardware. Like hard drive space has been, difficult. There's been problems with computers and problems with some of the camera gear, and so that's contributed to some of the factors that led to a delay in production of these videos. Also, though, I have another job. I have day job and like life and things. And then some of you know this too. I'm an author. I write various things. I'm sure I've mentioned a couple times on this channel. So before we get too deep into this particular video, which is really about a great discussion I had with filmmaker Max Neace, I just want to bring up that, and I don't know if this is a sponsored thing. Am I sponsoring myself, or I don't know what this is, but I'm going to say this video is brought to you by this book, Dragon of the Deep. This is this follow-up to my first book, Dragon Daughter. This book is coming out fairly soon in the next couple weeks. That's also what's been taking up a lot of my time. Right now, we're in the stages of trying to get this book into bookstores, which would lead to, hopefully, speaking engagements, book signings, things like that. So that's been a pretty big push. And if you're curious, this is the first book. This is Dragon Daughter, out. Book 2 is coming out. I'll link my website in the description of this video if you're curious. And also on the website, there'll be on the blog area, you'll find articles that deal with this video topic, which is Shift, and others related. So if you don't know, the film festival known as Cinequest, or Cinequest Film and Creativity Festival, has been in town for the past 2 weeks. I've been covering as a media person, press person here. This is my press badge. Today is the last day, and so I hope to get there to attend the closing ceremonies and maybe talk to some of the other filmmakers again while I'm there. This is my 6th time covering the event, and I always have a good time there. I always meet some really cool people. I see old friends and meet new friends, and it's always a fun and really just creatively inspiring time. So many unique films come out there, and there's so many films that show that it's almost it's not possible to catch all of them. They show upwards of 200 plus films over the course of 2 weeks, which is major. Like, it's pretty wild. Like, it's and then there's like social events they have like a storyteller celebration. There's like live art taking place, dance, music. There's tons of stuff happening over the course of the 2 weeks. It's always a fun time. And so I've been covering the event. I've seen some really cool movies. I've talked to some of the filmmakers, and including Mr. Max Neace here, who you will be hearing from really soon. So I don't want to keep... There will be a review of this film coming up. I'll be posting on this channel very soon. I have to finish writing it because it will be posted also on the website as well. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for the other reviews from the films that I have seen already over the course of the festival. And then we'll be back to hopefully our regularly scheduled program with some of the other reviews. I've seen tons of movies in the span of time since the last video I posted here. And so there's a lot to talk about. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, here is the conversation with Max Neace, writer-director of Shift. I had a great time talking to him, and hopefully if you've got the space, it's a long one. So if you've got time, pull up a chair, grab a drink, some snacks, give a listen. It's a fun, off-kilter 90s comedy mystery with film noir inspirations, and it's a fun ride. It's not going to be for everybody, but I personally enjoyed it. Hopefully, this conversation will get you interested in the film. But here you go. This is a conversation with myself and Mr. Max Neace. Enjoy.
Oh, hello.
How you doing, Max? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
How
How
you
you doing,
doing?
man? Good.
Good. It's good to hear from you. Good to get to talk with you. Am
Yeah,
I
totally.
saying your last name right? Is it Neace? Nace?
Nice. Yeah.
You're right. That's what I thought. Okay, I thought it was. Wanted to make sure I had it.
Spot on.
Yeah, correctly. Thank you for the time. I just have you been? I saw you actually at the social last weekend. I didn't get a chance to.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually been up here the whole time. So I'm still in San Jose.
Oh, awesome. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But we came up when we got in. I had a movie here 2 years ago that I just produced and then but I couldn't come. So then when I got in with shift, I was like, oh well, I'm just gonna go up the whole time,
Go up.
check
Yeah.
it out, see what
Yeah,
San Jose is
man.
like.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Have been enjoying you've been enjoying yourself in the
Oh
area?
yeah, it's been a blast. We've met a lot of really cool filmmakers and we've seen some cool movies. And I'm based out of LA,
Oh,
and
okay.
so is a lot of my team. So we've met a lot of guys that are down there too. So I think we've made some new friends and hopefully some new collaborators in the future as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, I won't take up too much of your time. I'm excited to talk to you about this movie though. I just want to just like yeah,
Good. Yeah.
I'm just like first of all, I'll just say this movie wasn't for me, and I just no, I'm kidding. I'm totally no, I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. I actually really enjoyed it, and I this is actually right up my alley. I'm a fan of a good mystery and some anything with some noirish tendencies. Just rewatched Chinatown recently.
Oh,
Rewatched
amazing.
Blade
Yeah.
Runner. Things that have that feel. So
Yep.
it's like right in the same. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally with it. Before I get really into it, though, I have to ask you first of all. Uh, I was really curious about. Tell me about Grace Kelly. Like
Yeah.
as a,
Yeah.
like I'm curious about where that comes from as a concept for this particular film, and why the name Grace Kelly and not like you know Barbara Stanwyck or another name that's from the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a great question. It's definitely something that some people really respond to, and other people are like, man, what a weird choice that you made throughout this whole project. But she kind of evolved in the script, even from draft one, Grace Kelly was a character. The chair was in the movie. She squeaked and turned, but she didn't actually have lines of dialogue
Right.
that appear on screen. So like Tom would still interact with her in certain ways, when lean back and ask her questions, but she wouldn't actually speak. And as we got sort of deeper into the edit and the movie, it takes some weird turns to make some weird choices. So like we were like, well, why don't we just lean into the weird? And a lot of notes we were getting was like, I think you can make your movie weirder. Like right now it's bordering on maybe something that's too serious or doesn't know exactly what your tone is. And we were like, we always wanted the movie to be funny and for it to be a good time. So then my editor, Grant Vance, he was like, well, what if we actually like give her a voice and we, just drop in those lines of dialogue.
Lines. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm not sure. And we started to drop them in, and we were like, oh, this is actually hilarious, and it's very much our sense of humor, and we really responded to it. So then we just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And Grace Kelly comes from the Hitchcock movie Rear Window, which
Yeah.
obviously, it's a huge influence. So in the original draft of the script, her name was actually Iris Keene, who became a different character on the radio. Because I was like, oh, this doesn't really make sense for a chair. And we were making Rear Window essentially, just like a
Yeah.
riff on it at least. And I was like, why don't we just name her Grace Kelly? Like that's exactly who she is, and it's the character kind of with him the whole time. And that's sort of her origin story.
I love that. That was so offended. I was like, oh, first of all, I had to think about like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, because I mentioned I saw when you talked about the film at the social. That's one of the greatest hooks I ever heard for a film was the like Hitchcock and skinny jeans. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like I said, what the heck? I have to know what the heck that's about. Like, I need to know what that. So it's like it totally works when you start thinking about Grace Kelly and how it's like oh yes, right. The marriage makes perfect sense. It's like this is like it's
Yeah.
right there, and it is right. There's a lot of the rear window as a sort of as a container for the idea of it, and I think the execution it worked. Like for people who don't know Rear Window or Grace Kelly, just like it seems like it's a random name to pick, but I was like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
what's the reason for that? But then now thinking about it, it makes perfect sense. Like that's the
There's been a couple people that have asked a similar question, or they didn't even get the Rear Window bent to it,
yeah.
which obviously I wrote and directed it, so I was always using that as an influence. And I made my girlfriend watch the movie dozens of times while we were in
Oh yeah.
pre-production, just to like take as much as I could from it, because I think the movie is brilliant in itself. But there were people that after they watched it the second time, or even if some programmers had to watch it three times, if we were on the bent like just close to getting in and they weren't sure, they'd be like, oh, when I got the Rear Window references, the movie sort of like rolled out in front of me. I understood everything that was going on, because it is a mystery, and it is a little twisty and turny, and characters are lying to you a lot of the time, so you don't really know who's telling the truth. But I think once people realized sort of where the influence came from, they definitely responded to it a little bit more.
Oh yeah. It totally works. That's a good. And I think yeah. Once it all clicks, once you get some of those references, you go, oh, that's yeah. and at the time it actually fits too. It feels like it's its own thing too. It's not like a rip off of the
No, yeah,
definitely like okay, look, this is like as a benchmark to like how do we make it feel like this? It's like and it's
yeah,
great like how it fits within the context of like the 1990s and stuff, leads into my next question. Like, why? Like, there's an interesting mix of ideas in the movie, and I'm wondering when you think of like film noir, Hitchcockian, ideas, and the time period of the 1990s. What is it about the 1990s that felt like it was a good time period to place this film in? Like, why? Like, it's a 90s,
sure.
you like the what is it about that time period that fits
It was a
that?
few things. It was part of it, like the grunge aspect of the 90s is nice. And like to go back to the Hitchcock and skinny jeans kind of bent, like definitely that sort of lean in where we're like, we can make it kind of gritty, but like the 90s also, if you look back and you see pop culture references, it was sort of a goofy time as well.
Yeah, it was.
Um, yeah, it was like there were a lot of new things coming out and like the world was changing in really quick, like rapid ways. But honestly, like one of the first things for me that I was attracted to is I really don't like in movies where characters get put into dangerous situations and they pull out their cell phone and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't have service." It's the worst
Yeah,
line
yeah,
in the history
yeah,
of cinema. And
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I really don't want this
yeah.
character to do this. And I was like, we could put him deep in a facility and
No, yeah.
there's no service in there, but I was like, or I could just put a phone in the room and he can like try to call and he gets
Yeah.
trapped, into the room from time to time. So, I mean, largely it was like, I like the time of the 90s. I think it's kind of goofy. And since the movie is like goofy and suspenseful, it fit in there. But also it was like, how can I separate my character from everyone else? And when he is in danger, or if you're not sure if he's in danger, he actually like can't reach out to the outside world in just a quick, easy way.
Yeah, that's the one thing I appreciate that also too about the movie because the idea of like a landline phone and that
Yeah.
you're sort of like confined to the space if you need to like reach out to something or you can't like just go somewhere and like it's like
Yeah.
somebody, it's not easy to do if there's
Yeah,
like
we had to keep him in the room, like as much as we could, because it's a little bit like a play in that way where he's entering and exiting and people come in and sort of like invade his space. But it was a nice way that we could have other characters interact with him that otherwise would never show up there. And then he could listen to the radio, and call into the radio show and just have a lot of kind of different characters and elements that you don't know exactly how they're going to come together, but at least he has to be there to interact with them.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of like keeping time in the room, like there's something was it how important was it to like have it be like obviously having him in the same place feels like it adds to the tension when things are getting more serious and like things, more things are happening.
Mhm.
What was was it pretty intentional early on to have, the office space be like the space the majority of the movie would take place and not like,
Yes, yeah. And we did have a couple discussions about maybe trying to get him out of the room from time to time, and that could have been interesting. But even from the very beginning, there was actually a friend of mine who initially a few years ago broached the idea of like, let's make a horror movie in a storage unit facility. And while Shift is more of a noir suspense mystery film, it's not straight horror by any means. I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. Those places are creepy. What if
yeah,
we do it from
yeah,
the security guard's perspective? And I was like, we could tell the whole movie on a security monitors. I think that would be a unique perspective that I've never really seen before. And it could be a fun way to just like unpack a mystery where you're sort of removed from it, but you can see just enough that you can kind of build your suspensions. And he actually was like, I think that's not a very good idea. And I was like, well, I'm going to write the script anyway. And I did. And he ended up responding to it. And then we just kind of went off to the races and tried to put the movie together.
yeah. Let's talk about that because that's one of my later questions I was going to ask you later. But I feel like this is a good segue to that question about like having the story be told through surveillance cameras. Like there's a whole what I loved also about just the idea of telling a story with not just one but a series of surveillance cameras, right? And then
Mhm.
there's this rhythm to those cameras. Like there's like a choreography to how movement is happening.
Yeah.
Like watching from screen one through three. It's like this three. There's like a whole like choreography. How
The
much
snake.
thought
Yeah.
was yeah? There's like a whole thing about that. How much thought was placed into feels like to getting the cameras like at the right angles to make it feel like it's to get the movements right to like have it be like like
It was honestly pretty complicated. So
yeah
the script is like so straightforward that it's just like on one continuous and then on two
right.
continuous. So like there's not a lot of dialogue and it's mostly action lines. And so you read the script and you're like, oh, this is going to be really easy to make. And then we were like getting into pre-production and we were sort of like, well, no one has shot these security monitors yet. So how do we actually like make this dance work the way we want it to work? So what we ended up doing was we met our co-producer Ben Betts, whose production company is on the movie too, the Digital Image. Associates LLC, and he's worked in Hollywood for years and basically collects all of these old VHS, like VCR things and old monitors and stuff. And he's like, oh, I have all these things. I think we can figure it out. So he took three A7Ss, went into an actual storage facility and shot 3 hallways at a time. So we shot 1, 2, 3 for a day, 4, 5, 6 for a day, and then 7, 8, 9 for a day. So we sort of shot the movie 4 times, where we would have every character in every movement go all the way through and then exit. And then they would go down the street to a hotel we were holding everyone in, change their clothes, come back, and do the same thing over and over again. Um, and then Ben actually, he was working major overtime that initial weekend because we shot in that facility for 3 days. And then over the weekend, he cut that entire movie together, which was all the movements. And then when we went into the actual build of the set, we could then play it back live for our actors. So we would basically sit there and be like, action monitor, that action would start on the monitor, action camera, and then action actors, depending on how they wanted to move. So we were calling action 3 different ways. And Bobby, our DP, he has done a lot of TV work, and we shot on this like small manually operated crane that had a motorized head.
Yeah.
And the snake aspect that you were mentioning was like, when we were in pre-production, I didn't want to have to go to 3 and then drop across to 4. I thought that would be an ugly movement. So we ended up switching that middle row around. So you could kind of go back through, and it became this like secret S that was kind of moving through the whole facility.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. You totally see it. It's like it's trackable too. Your eyes watching it, and the film takes its time to actually show you, hey, the character moves from here to here, and then they turn the corner, and then the corner turns or something else too. Someone turns a corner on camera 3, and then camera 4. Like it's
Yeah.
put together really nicely. You can see that it's a really nice dance. And then also conversely, near the end of the film, there's the other side where we see from Tom's perspective going from he's watching the moves happening, but we're not seeing the security cameras.
Yeah. Right.
Like, gosh, like that was that put together after the actual sort of the surveillance shots were done? Was there already a thought process around like we already know what the S looks like from one side? We can just shoot it this way from Tom's perspective and have it.
Sort of. We were figuring it out as the days were going on, and we shot the movie in 15 days. So like we didn't have a ton of time to like really plan, I think, as much as we wanted, but we did get the rhythm down. And the motif of the whole film is on those monitors, so I was always hell bent like we need to shoot this from like every angle, and we want to take our time so you get comfortable. There's some more surprising moments later on in the movie where you think you're comfortable and you don't really know what's going to happen, and then suddenly something does take place. And the shot that you're talking about when it's from Tom's perspective, since we had already established everything, that was one of the later days on set. And basically Bobby and I were talking, and we just had the idea, well, what if we turn the camera around? Because everyone knows at that point where we're going, but there's been some character changes in the movie, and some more like some of the crazier things have taken place. So let's see how Tom is feeling now at this time. And it allowed us, I think, to get into his head a little bit more. Sure. Because it is a plot driven movie. And while Tom does have, he has a character arc and he's dealing with some stuff, we wanted to try to get into his head, at least at the end of the film, so we know where he's thinking or where he wants to go, if he feels trapped, if he doesn't. Sure. So that was kind of the move. That was kind of the decision behind it. But it was on the day that we decided to flip it around and sort of have him stare right down the barrel. So he's like almost watching the camera.
Yeah.
And you become those monitors, at least for a little bit.
But you mentioned Tom dealing with some stuff, and then like how difficult was it to, because there's also like the film is mostly, there's a lot of humor throughout, it's peppered throughout the film, but there's also these little moments where Tom is dealing with some stuff, estrangement, and then you have Scarlett is dealing with some loss. Mm-hmm. How like those are areas where it could have gotten a little bit more like heavier. Like how difficult was it to balance those two tones? Was it easier because it was mostly funny, or did it feel like there was a lot of was it more?
It took some time. It took some time, mostly in the edit. I think like my sense of humor is pretty dry, and the movie is dry too. So like there's definitely, while I think the movie is a riot and I think it's very funny, I've definitely watched it with people where they're like, I don't know exactly if I'm supposed to be laughing at this or if this is too heavy.
Yeah.
And so like there's certainly the fear or the uncertainty that some people go into it and they won't exactly track with our humor. But with Tom and Hal especially, they understood the tone of the script very well. And Allison, who played Mrs. Jones, she really thought the script was very funny too. So like we were able to they had to take themselves seriously, but know that sometimes in these moments that a character is going to say like a goofy thing. Like there's that initial moment between Tom and Mrs. Jones where she's like, you're not going to tell him, are you? And he's like, your son? And like, you already know a
Yeah,
lot of
right,
these
right.
things is just like
Yeah.
characters are just not exactly understanding where they are in the world. So it was hard. It was mostly in the edit though. And Grant has a great sense of humor as well. And he finished the film and he knew exactly, we have an old rapport. We went to high school together and have known each other for years. So kind of building the humor took some time and he wanted to push it a little bit weirder, which I think helped a lot. And then I wanted to restrain some stuff so we at least had the heart of Tom's character arc from time to time. But I think working together, we managed to put it together as best as we could. And we think the movie is very funny. So we still laugh as we watch it to this day.
So,
But
and it's very funny. I imagine too that kind of dynamic, that kind of relationship makes it a little bit easier when you have someone you can on your team that there's a shorthand. You guys,
exactly, yeah.
and you guys understand each other's sense of humor, and it's like
Hmm.
not that much of stretches and things you have to do to sort of make it,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
this.
And it was fun. It was a lot of fun to put stuff together. Like he was the champion. There's a montage that pops up sort of later in the film, and he was a big one that believed in that. And there was another producer of ours who also had suggested something similar earlier on. So everyone kind of knew what it needed. It took them massaging me a little bit too to find some of that stuff. But when we saw it, it worked, and it was like, oh, this is exactly what we needed.
That's awesome. Like, can we? So I want to shift slightly and talk some more about character stuff. Can we talk a little bit about Mrs. Jones? As you mentioned her, and like, and how I'm curious about like, so I think of this character, and she's talking about in the movie about uh, stealing. Like, there's like stealing sons. She lost a son. She's stealing. There's like what I thought of was Carmen Sandiego, and Carmen Sandiego. In the '90s was a huge popular show, even like down to the term gumshoe. A lot of kids didn't know what a gumshoe was until you watch
Right.
Carmen Sandiego, and you go. But I'm curious in the writing process, where did Mrs. Jones come from? How much of that was how much of her was you know uh, an inspiration from other femme fatales from other film noir stories, or what was she an amalgam of different people, or what was the different characters from film history?
Yeah, I definitely wanted her to be a femme fatale. That was like
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted her to be. So I went through a lot of old noir films just of like different ages, some like really obscure ones, even like Peeping Tom and like things that
Yeah.
like that our movie I didn't fall in love with that movie, but I was like the voyeurism aspect of this is interesting and like
Sure. Yeah.
it's sort of goofy. And I wanted her to be probably the most serious character because she is definitely the one that is she's not dealing with the most, but she has this like really complicated history with a lot of the people at the facility, her own family, and then eventually with Tom too. So I think with even with Allison after we talked about the script a few times and she was coming on, she knew that she had to take the role as seriously as you could to sort of, there's some mystery and some danger that comes along with her character, but also we had to inject these moments where she was a mirror of Tom in a lot of ways. So it was sort of about building a strange family. And or throughout the writing process, it did become this thing where it was like, well, Tom is dealing with his mom. And at first he was not, it was sort of just a straight mystery. And then Mrs. Jones is dealing with her son. So they became sort of a mother-son kind of type of character. And then even Hal is dealing with his own mom, sort of in a way. So like everyone is sort of a foil to one another, or they at least reflect each other in some way. And that once we kind of cracked that on the script level, it helped inform at least our actors of sort of what we were going for and how everyone was interconnected.
It's
But
certainly
it
made
definitely
for
took some time.
Yeah, it's certainly made for a much richer like experience than it might have been otherwise. I think you definitely get a sense, even if you don't know all the specifics and the details of what the other people that they're those characters are dealing with, you understand
Mhm.
to where
Yeah,
to go, okay, that's enough for them to and that they can dictate the actions that they make, the choices that they make, and what they share and what they don't. Those kinds of things.
exactly. Yeah. And you think you want the same thing, and then ultimately you want completely different things, and you don't understand that someone was like trying to take advantage of you or manipulate you in a different way.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
You talk about how what was the script writing process like? And when you're crafting the actual story and stuff like that, how long did that take? Was it like a quick write? Once you knew what the idea was it
It
pretty
was
quick?
pretty fast. The first draft from my buddy's like initial pitch of the horror to me sort of taking it in the surveillance direction. I think it only took, I don't know, 2 or 3 months to get a first draft of the script out. And then from there, once we had the first writing, the full script, then it took I don't know, probably 4 or 5 more months to get us to the final draft. But honestly, we were writing, at least I was writing all the way through the process because there's a lot of radio characters outside of Iris, and there's a lot of people on the phone and a lot of different moments like that that we actually recorded as we were editing. The very first cut of this movie was like almost silent. Like there was very little radio music. There was very little people calling in. There wasn't as much dialogue that is in the movie now. And after we had some test screenings and people were like, it's interesting, but this is getting old a little bit. So how can we spice it up? And the answer to that was with the radio and with conversations on the monitors. We actually sound designed every monitor. So there's a version of the movie in which there's dialogues happening in each one of the monologue in each one of the monitors as people walk through them. And ultimately we decided that it was more interesting if as you get deeper into the facility, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And so we found that middle ground. But we were adding stuff all the time. We were calling our actors and being like, hey, we need this ADR line. And they were like, we've done a million ADR lines for this movie. And it's like, well, we're trying to like piece it together as best we can. So we were writing all the way through. I mean, it took about 2 years to get to the final cut of this movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was in the writing room, breaking down exactly what characters were up to, who they were speaking to on the monitors, and like trying to craft a story that otherwise wasn't initially written. So it was a lot. But
Yeah, it sounds like it was a process, just sort of like from cracking the actual story, and then like she sort of, because all that time there's a lot of shaping and reshaping and sort of retooling to get to what the final product was. Like,
yeah, and it really was. I mean, even like Grace Kelly, we changed her lines up until January of this year. Like we were going in and we were making the final DCP, and we were like, we're not totally done yet. We were still tweaking some sound design stuff, and then we were like, well, let's spice Grace Kelly up a little bit. So we started to do that and make her a little bit more, I don't know, sassier, I guess. She had a little bit more of a personality in the final cut than she did in the initial cuts. But we were writing all the time. It felt like it never stopped.
Wow,
There's so many versions of this movie. Yeah, it's pretty unreal.
I want to jump back to Grace Kelly for a second too, because it did feel like it was legit. She was a legit character. She had just as much sort of agency.
Yep.
You had some pop to her. Some like she like every squeak every time she was doing something was like, oh, she's just as much a part of the situation as even to the idea that she was the employee of the month at one point was like,
Right. Yeah. She was a blast to sort of develop. Once we realized that the movie, even the perspective of most of the scenes that you watch when people are interacting on monitors is her perspective. So like you're in that chair perspective a lot of the time. And so you're like, she's a chorus to a point, like she's one of the audience members a little bit where she knows what's going on. She has a little bit more of a creative bent, but she was a blast to develop and gave our movie, I think, a fun quirk to it that otherwise we might have just been another Rear Window type movie. But with Grace Kelly, we were pushing it into this more absurd, not necessarily Lynchian, but maybe we were scratching at that surface to just have a little bit stranger of a bent where you're like, oh, there's a sentient chair in this movie. And in the first 10 seconds of the movie that she can speak. Right. And even if at first you're kind of like, what was that? That was strange. Yeah. But it just keeps happening. So you just have to buy into it. And that was at least our idea behind it, was if we believe in it, then most of the audience will probably believe in it too.
Oh yeah, she was definitely real. She's definitely fully well rendered and fully rendered. How important was it that the audience actually got a sense of everything she said? There's a couple sequences in there where there's like a whole bunch of like subtitles. And
it's a great monologue. Yeah,
going too fast. Like I don't know. Like was that intentional for people to like not really you just know it doesn't matter really what you're saying. It's just like
it can give you a little bit of context of what she's doing. But we actually, Grant and I, we probably spent too much time on that. But we based it off of King Lear's speech and the Shakespearean play. And it's actually written loosely in iambic pentameter. So like we were breaking it down. We had three. It's all about the Orpheus myth and turning around and looking at people and like Persephone and stuff. And we wanted it to be as thematic as possible. But at that point in the movie, you already know she's talking. And like while if you want to really know what she's saying, it's fun. But it was like, oh, there's no way that we're gonna read this. Like that was sort of what we did, and we thought it was hilarious, and we were like, oh, this is just a beautiful monologue by Grace Kelly that no one will ever read because it's too long. But we had a lot of fun writing that one and putting it together.
I did catch the editable, like some of the Shakespearean stuff. I love Shakespeare. It's one of the things I'm another fan of, and so it was like to me when I like stuff like that in any film, because I was like, instantly elevates this other. It adds this other like that. Actually, it makes it actually more funny too, more humorous. Like
Right.
the level of depth that Grace is that as a character
Yeah.
that she holds, that you just like audiences we get a glimpse of it. She's on to some other stuff. That's like okay, she's really. You could argue that she's like the that she's the surrogate. She's like the real proper audience of the whole.
Absolutely. Yeah,
She's
totally.
doing
And
this stuff,
she's a
Thomas.
chair. She
Yeah,
can't do a lot on her own, but like she can observe and form opinions. So I
yeah.
don't know who was working at your storage when they were reading Shakespeare aloud to her, but like, they definitely influenced her in some way and she took that to heart. Uh,
And the other thing I love about that is like when we see things from Grace's perspective, we hear, there's like squeaking, the chair's moving, like no one's sitting in the chair at that moment, but you hear it's like, okay, that's
yeah.
a, yeah, this is she's paying attention to what's happening. Like if no one else
Yeah. And that was honestly Joe Stockton, our sound designer. He was a legend. And as we came in and we were sound designing this movie, I wanted to be very auditory because you're trapped in space. So like, how can you make the world seem as big as possible? And Joe was on the same page as me the whole time. So he was like, oh yeah, let's just bump up these squeaks. And he was doing all the tactile kind of monitor stuff, VHS tapes, and
yeah,
everything that I think brings the world to life in a way that it otherwise could be a little flat. And
yeah,
I think our soundscape is pretty fantastic, especially when if you listen to it with headphones or surround sound, you can really tell that there's a lot going on. And even just like simple scenes, we tried to do as much as we could.
yeah. You mentioned making the world feels bigger because it does definitely feel even though you're in one spot, it never feels like it's like you don't feel bored like oh we're just in the same spot all the time. There's
Yeah,
enough happening sort of just with the context that you're given and also like things that are referenced that you never see in the film like the other parts that you just like okay we know there's other stuff that's sort of happening outside of
right.
this. It does feel like there's the richness there that really gives like some real texture and really I loved like the VCRs and stuff like the tapes and stuff. It's like this stuff that you can and then the mini
Yeah.
DV the mini
Oh
DV
my God.
like shows
Unbelievable. Greatest prop in the movie.
yeah, what I was like, oh, they actually got a real mini DVD. Like, I haven't seen, like, I have one. Like, I haven't seen
Yeah.
one like in ages. The fact that I love the movie references, hey, this is new mini DV situation coming out, whatever it is, and then you have to talk
Yeah,
right,
right.
like stuff. Was there actually footage taken like with that camera, like working footage that was used in the film?
Yeah, it wasn't used in the film, and I really regret it because
Yeah, that
there
was,
was there were some days on set, at least in the storage facility, where our prop designer gave it to me, and I was just messing around with the camera. So like, there's a lot of I don't even think we have that footage anymore, even if
yeah,
we've had the camera, but we never used any of the actual stuff in the movie. And we wanted to. There's that shot that you kind of see inside the monitor a couple times, or inside the storage facility a couple times,
yeah,
the unit itself, and we used a different camera for that. But we were thinking maybe we could use it. It was so grainy and like kind of dumbed
yeah,
down that it was tough to like really show what we wanted to show with that
yeah.
actual camera. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of awesome. That's yeah, it was cool that it is a great prop. That I agree. I think it's probably one of the best props I've seen in a film, like in a while. Like especially in a period film that like for placed
Yeah.
firmly in that time period too. Like when that's right around the time when digital filmmaking was taking off in the late '90s. It was just starting to be like a big
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, high
Yeah.
eight, and all those things were just really coming into fruition. So it's cool to see that where it's a clear like pinpoint of what the time period was. Like, oh, if you didn't really know, the music helped, but also people,
Yeah.
like, the nerdy people who mess with that type of stuff would know, hey, this kind of camera was
Yeah.
interesting.
Absolutely. And Ben Betts gets a lot of praise for that. He brought in a lot of that stuff. He collected a lot of it and let us use it as much as we wanted. So it
That's
was a blast.
that's man, the other thing I wanted to ask around like making the giving the audience this feel of that the world is bigger than just that room. I want to talk about how and like sort of where like it felt like there was like this is like the working at the storage facility. It's a storage facility. Like, why was it that other people who worked there previously were able to get out? Tom ended up being like, he might be stuck. Is there some other organization? Is it a front for something else? So like what was Hal doing there? What was he doing with the body? Those are the things that you're like, oh shoot. The fact that the movie
Yeah.
never talks about those stuff, it's genius because it's like you get a sense of even if you're right or wrong, you get a sense that there's other things that Hal's probably into, like in
Yeah.
addition to the job that he's doing.
Yeah, I think
That's
Hal
great.
definitely like at towards the end of the film, he does have a line where he's just like, "I was just trying to do my job," and like largely that is what he's up to. Like he's sort of an endearing character. I think he's pretty
Yeah,
tragic at the
yeah,
end of the day. Like you want to like him, but he's also, he's kind of smarmy, and you definitely can't trust him. So I don't really know how much of it is a front besides just where the movie goes and like what the ultimate climax for the movie is.
Yeah.
But he definitely wants everyone there to be as comfortable as possible if there just happens to be some bad things that are going on there.
Yeah.
So like when the world is sort of interacting with these things that we don't ever see, it was important for us to, we're trying to be as firmly in Tom's perspective as possible. And if I was working a night shift job like that, I feel like I would be asleep on the clock sometimes. I want to be paying total attention. I might be reading Shakespeare aloud. You never know what it's going to be. And so I think Tom just like unfortunately pays a little too close attention at that job. So he gets roped into it where other people like Escobar is an old worker that shows up from time to time and calls in. Like he was paying a little too much attention too, but he went the other way where he was like, well, I'm just going to get out of this situation. And him and Hal had their own conversation. And a lot of the other people, you see some of their names, but they never really speak to you in the movie. They probably just never really caught on to anything, or they were like, "Oh, this doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm not interested in this. Yeah, like I'm just gonna
Yeah.
move on." And I just think people are like that. Like some people are
Yeah.
observational and they want to get to the bottom of what's ever happening, even if it is mundane. And there are the people that are like, I don't care what's happening. I'm just going to avoid whatever kind of drama this could give me. And so that's all that it was. It was mostly just different people working a job in different ways.
Yeah, no, you brought up Escobar. I thought he was pretty hilarious too. Like like the phone conversations with him and just like certain things about his like character were just like, oh, this is great. Just like having this guy as a to give Tom like another perspective. Of what was it like working here when you were here? Because we're as far as us, we're going on this journey with Tom and we're sort of learning what Tom's
Yeah.
experience is working
Mhm.
there. But like
Yeah.
there's at least one person that can talk to him and give him some context about, oh, maybe Tom is onto something. Maybe he's right about something
Right.
he suspects about stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
He's secretly my favorite character.
I loved him. I was like,
Yeah, I like writing his dialogue was a blast. I always thought he was so much fun to just like put into bad situations and he'd be just like, oh God, I can't believe this is
right.
happening to me again. But he I think there's the moral turpitude line that he says
Yeah.
in the movie, and
Yeah.
like he
Yeah.
definitely like you can
Yeah.
tell he has a conscience, but he really doesn't want to have one. So he's like, like I'm really torn about trying to help people and really just kind of staying in my lane.
Yeah.
And if Tom is the one that wants to go as deep into the rabbit holes you can go, some of the other characters that just show up by name, they don't want to get involved at all. Escobar's that middle line where he's like, man, I know there's something weird going on here. I don't know, maybe know exactly how deep it goes, but
Yeah.
he ultimately decides to help him, which, is a
Yeah.
serious detriment.
Right.
But
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Escobar, it seemed to me, he seemed like he was like the key. Like without Escobar, you don't really have like there's Tom has no real direction of like where's he gonna
yeah,
go from wherever he ends up before he gets in touch with him. But
exactly. Yeah.
Escobar's like the key. He's really like the glue anyway that holds the mystery part together. He's like that character's like, hey, firmly in the middle. Go
Yeah.
your way with
Yeah.
this guy.
Exactly. And we needed something for Tom to find that was outside of himself and to just, I like dialogue. I think dialogue is a lot of fun and you can learn a lot about characters, even if they're not doing exposition, just how they speak and interact with the world. So Escobar was just a blast to kind of like, you take it out of the context of just the noir where people are like being mysterious and dancing around each other. And he's just like, dude, just don't get involved in this
It is
weird shit, like just stay out of it. And you're like, yeah, that's exactly what you should probably do. But he was just fun. Like you said, he really was like a glue character that just the whole plot could kind of center, not around him, but at least maybe something that he had or something that he knew.
right. It was like the key.
Almost a MacGuffin. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's what it felt like. I was like, oh, it's like there's something, and even there's a piece where he calls and Tom's not at the desk, so it's
Right. Yeah.
like yo, you got this is like the most valuable situation. You missed this. Where are you at?
Yeah, and that was so much fun to put together too because we were just like, oh yeah, that's one of the longer. I think that sequence is like 7 minutes long, and it's actually one take. We don't
Oh,
actually cut in that sequence, but like the way that the monitors feel like you're moving around a lot, so it doesn't necessarily feel like you're just sitting there for one long take. And Escobar was on set that day, just like in the hanging out in the set, just like reading his lines, and everyone was like just trying not to laugh because it was this really complicated camera move that we were almost timing out to his voice. But he was great to work with. It was so much fun, and putting those longer sequences together were cool when they finally, started to work and we got the rhythm of the camera down.
yeah, yeah. Speaking of that, you meant going back to I want to talk about like casting. What was the process like? Because everybody in the film is great. Like like everyone understood sort of the tone.
Right.
Yeah, that comes through in the like no, not one person is sort of like off in the calibration of it. It feels like, oh, this is yeah, this is funny. There's an honest to goodness mystery going on. There's some noir stuff going on, but it's not like none of it is feels like sort of out of place. So how did you go about finding the different actors to fill different parts? Like how difficult was that process for you?
It's interesting. There's a couple stories. The first person we cast was Iris, Iris Keene, the radio
Oh,
host, and we had a couple casting directors that were on the movie that helped tremendously, and they were sending us tapes of like their selects. And one of the first ones we found was Iris, and we were like, oh, this is her. Like, this is unbelievable. Angela Elise was just like had the perfect voice, knew
oh,
exactly what we were looking for. And we were like, oh, okay, well, at least the radio stuff in the movie is going to work. And there's a lot of that. So like we found this first part. And then they found us Allison Mickety, who played Mrs. Jones. And Allison was great. You know, she didn't audition for the role. We just had a meeting. And the way that she talked about the character and kind of what the direction she wanted to take it was exactly aligned with what I wanted to do. So we were thrilled to bring Allison on. And she's a great actress and she's very funny in and of herself. And I think she was put in a tough position sometimes where she's maybe the most serious character. So she's around these like sort of goofy caricatures of like other types of noir people. But she really leaned into it and was a ton of fun to work with. Sean O'Brien is actually from my hometown, serendipitously, but I didn't know that at the time. Our producer G Gonzalez had worked with him on a movie, and he was like, "I think Sean is the guy you want to play Hal." And it was between Sean and one other actor, and they both were two totally different takes. Sean was kind of the goofy, like, you know, his hair is always messed up, his clothes don't fit, sort of like guy, and that's how he came into the audition. And then another actor we had was very serious and like almost menacing.
yeah,
Um, and we were like, ah, man, you know, this would be interesting both ways. But ultimately, Sean just he understood the script. We got along immediately, and we were like, oh, it's got to be Sean.
great.
And I'm so happy that it was. Sean and I actually we just made another short film together where he plays
Oh,
another kind of like goofy character. It's got some more voyeurism stuff. But then really I think the big story and standout is the guy that plays Tom, Connor McGill. It's his first ever role.
yeah,
He's
I
never
couldn't
acted
find
in
any.
anything before.
I
Yeah.
was like, he was good. I haven't seen anything. I was researching. I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
He's a friend of mine. And a
Oh,
few years ago, I was like, "Hey man, if I ever write a movie for you, would you do it?" And he was like, "Yeah," because every situation I've ever seen Connor put himself into, he always rises to the occasion and does a great job. And I was like, "I know you can be funny. I know you can be serious. Like, I know we could figure this out together." But ultimately, what we decided to do was we moved him from the lead to a producer because we
yeah,
were going to try to cast more of a name for Tom.
sure, yeah,
And we ultimately casted someone else. They first day of shooting, I pull up to set, get out of my car. That actor calls me. He's like, "Hey man, I got COVID. I can't be there." And I'm like, "Oh, great, day one." And so he was like, "Are we going to push the shoot?" And I was like, we don't have the money to push the shoot. Like, this is our window to make this movie." So I walked up to Connor, who was on set producing, and I was like, "Hey man, do you want to star in this movie again?" And he was like, "Absolutely." So day one, he just
yeah.
became Tom again. And I mean, honest, truly, thank goodness he did, because I think he understood the tone more than anyone. And it was written with his sort of cadence and personality in mind. So he just fell right into it and did a really great job.
No, it was great. It was just like the authenticity that was like everything, even the subtles, the non-spoken stuff, the stuff about like the filling out one of the intake forms about like, hey, you got to put it on your emergency contact, like the
Right.
science around that stuff, facial expressions around that stuff. It just was like, oh,
Hmm.
you believed, you don't question for a moment the truth of what's being conveyed there. So I'm like, oh, this guy, it's great. Like you got to have them.
Yeah, that's
Like,
great to hear. Connor would love to hear it. I hope he gets to work
yeah.
more
Oh,
with
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk,
Uh,
you make sure I mention that because I was like it was the perfect sort of uh he was perfect for to experience this story as like alongside as that character. You just feel like I think for me personally too, like I had a similar job. I was working like late nights at this at my old actually at San Jose State, actually not far from
okay,
downtown
cool.
area
Yeah.
in there. And so as a creative person, you're always like interested in like what are the sort of stories that are happening there if you're working, you're doing patrol, whatever it is, and you're cleaning a room and you're like, and I always have a notebook. I was always like writing stuff like for
Yeah, right, exactly.
story stuff. This is a cool thing for our story. It's supposed to, like so, and Tom felt like that kind. He as a character felt like someone I would have come across at the.
Right. Just like, don't be curious, man. Yeah, but
It
it's like,
was
do
perfect. Yeah, I was like, oh, just be. Like,
that.
it was perfect. Like I just like, oh man, this is great. Like man, next I wanted to ask you about like so the shooting process. So like what cameras were you guys using for like the main like the actual like the so the non-security stuff, just like the main
Right.
stuff. in the room, in the office, different places? Like, what sort of like tech were you guys using for to get?
So we shot on Alexa Mini,
Oh
great
yeah, like,
camera. Yeah, I mean, and it allowed us to do a lot with color in post too.
sure, yeah.
But we had, I mean, the coolest thing that we had on set, and we shot the entire movie on, except for like one dolly shot that I think we used. But we had this thing called a mini scope, and I didn't wasn't even sure what it was when we were talking about what we talked about earlier, like figuring out that S shape, because we always wanted the camera to float and be able to like move through these monitors as seamlessly as possible. It was this motor operated, or there's a motorized head that the already sat on top of.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was hanging, and Bobby, our DP, could control it from a monitor where we were sitting. And then Eddie Zafina was our dolly grip. And basically what he would do is he would actually move the crane and work the arm. So we had to like push in with it and then move it around. And we also we used a lot of zoom lenses. So we were like dollying, zooming all the time. Our first AC, she had a tough time from time to time and ultimately did a really great job because we were like pushing in so far on a zoom. And then on top of that, we would be pushing like dollying in or booming in with our arm that it was like there were like three layers of focus that she had to find. And she did a really great job. And I think the movie turned out great because of it. But we always wanted to have sort of that 70s neo-noir vibe, almost like, you're watching a Friedkin movie and you can just zoom from the top of the building all the way into a square or something. But that was really all that we had. We had that mini scope allowed us to make the entire sort of visual language of the movie that I had imagined at a script level, and then that Bobby understood too on the script level, and he was like, "Oh, this is how we're going to shoot it." He never had a doubt in his mind, and he was right. Like he absolutely crushed it in that way.
Yeah, no, it came together really nicely. It looks like, oh man, you look at just the look of it, like, and you mentioned like what some of the other tech allowed you guys to do for color, like in when sort of the color correction stuff. Like it felt like something that you would have seen in the
Hmm.
90s. Like it could have felt like just visually speaking, like it would have been like
Right, yeah.
the
And that
colors.
was important. Yeah, we wanted it to be like dark and some blues and then maybe some yellow some days, but we wanted to like really lean into that. When characters turn into the monitor, sometimes there's like a wash of color that comes over their face. We always wanted to feel that stuff. And since it was a fairly low budget movie that we didn't have all of kind of the I don't know, flags and different things we wanted to use for that. But once we got into the color space, we had a really great colorist team that was just like they would listen to me for hours, like trying to tell them about like different colors we were looking for. And they were very patient and we got it to look, I think, in a pretty unique and cool way, especially in the modern day.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. It fits. It totally. It works real well. One of my last questions. I wanted to go back to Iris because we didn't. She right as a character, she's fantastic. Like you, how much of the of that other side of it? Because it felt like on one hand, I know I'm reaching. When once we get to see Iris, it's like it felt like in one way she's working. There's an like almost like a mirror job to Tom. Like she's doing something that's like a maybe she likes the job, maybe she does. We don't know her feelings about the job that she's doing, but
Right.
it's the idea like oh someone is they're sending me stuff. There's like some annoyance about
Yeah.
like some parts of the job. Like I wonder how deep did you get into the once you established that the radio portion was going to be like a pretty key piece to the film. How much was had did you leave in or take out about what to show about that side of the story? Like what Iris's piece in it was, or was there any? It may not have been in it, may not have been
Yeah,
nothing.
we didn't really I never really wanted to leave the room. Like really early on, I never wanted to leave the office space. I was always wanted the whole movie to take place there and to try to tell as interesting as a story as we could. And then the last line has changed throughout the movie, but once we decided that we were going to go to the next room, that can you keep a secret note that Gumshoe sends to her? That was originally the last line of the movie. And he just called in and asked that question. And that's how the movie was going to end. But since we started to develop kind of in the back half of the script, there's the mini DV and there's like the little tape. And what do we show on the little tape? And it allowed us to actually, we don't even actually see what happens, but we imply it through sound. And it allowed us to go there and kind of see Iris. And I think it gives people sort of almost a breath that they're like, oh, the world is bigger outside of this room and you can go into another room. And even though it is another mirror, like I mean, all of the characters are mirroring themselves in some ways throughout the entire movie that she she just can finally see something for the first time because all she does is hear everything that kind of comes her way. So it was nice to give her kind of the opposite that Tom has, where Tom sees everything, but doesn't really have anyone to talk to about it except for her. And she's the opposite. She talks to everyone, but she doesn't see anything. So it was just a way that we could like, to try to bow tie or bookend the ending with also, wrapping up the entire plot and implying maybe what Tom would do next. But
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. That's the other thing too. I thought that was really cool. That book ending of it, because like you mentioned, Tom sees stuff. Tom is seeing things on monitors, but he's not hearing conversations on his mind. He can't hear
right.
anything.
Yeah.
Iris is hearing all these stories and stuff, and now she gets to see something. But it's a nice little like, oh, that's a great. It's just a
Yeah.
way even you only see just for that portion. You don't get a lot, but you don't need it. It's like this is enough to really get you can feel what happens after that. You already know what the rest of it is like.
Yeah, right, exactly. You know where it's going. And like
Like,
we've been there. Like, we've just
you know,
been it's implied to us a couple different ways. So it's like, okay, we at least know where it's gonna go. But
right.
Angela was really great to work with, and we went into her character a little bit about how she probably wanted to be a journalist, but obviously didn't want to be doing these like cheesy detective kind of like radio shows. She's obviously putting on a radio voice too, so like she is acting to a point. But Iris was always an important character in the script early on, and we ended up adding a lot of her stuff through ADR throughout the editing process, where we would have a couple of the basic phone conversations that we worked in more. So
Yeah, no, again another sort of piece that I said makes the tapestry like that was crafted sort of that much more rich. You're not just spending the whole time with Tom and one other
right.
person. There's other stuff in there that actually makes it just like, oh, this is like it feels like it's the richness there. Just like, oh, this is just as like as far as funny as it is, there's just enough of like a weight to the mystery
Hmm.
that it stands up to any other mystery. Like it's like to me, it felt like, okay, this is just as good as any other. If you're following along, I think one of the fun things about mystery stories, as the
Yeah.
audience, you're trying to piece together the clues too. You go, oh, this person did it. This person's a part of it.
Right.
This person definitely knows something more than what they're. This is like they're not. Oh, or I was wrong or whatever. Like that's part of the fun that this film actually still has. It's just as much a mystery as any other mystery out there.
Oh yeah, totally.
Have
I
some
mean,
some humor in it too that actually gives you something else, another flavor that you don't really get to in a lot of other mysteries. Like
well, thank
and
you. Yeah.
and not just the humor, this the kind of humor. There's some dryness of the humor, and it's like, well, what? Like, wait, as an audience, you have to like remember, you have to like, wait, is that what they say? Like this, like that's not like
Yeah.
what sense
Right.
does that make? Like it's,
Yeah,
that's a
totally.
when you don't get wrapped up in it. Just if you just go with it, it actually makes it that much more of a fun experience. And I just yeah, really I enjoyed it. I think that's I had another question. I think I wanted to mention, but I don't want to. I just oh the other so the it had to do with like uh tension, like tension both in terms of the mystery, but also in terms of like the comedy. Was there much tension in the comedy feels like that was like there's an ease to the humor in the film. Like how
Yeah.
much of the push and pull was involved with the comedy piece in conjunction with the tension that's inherent in a mystery. Like is that like was that
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we definitely it was always important to me that both were constant in the movie. And I'm actually surprised still when I watch it sometimes how many jokes and gags there are in the movie. Because it's almost like every 3 minutes there's like a new setup punchline that's happening. So like and while if you are paying close attention to the movie and the mystery is a little convoluted and fun to try to unravel, that like I think it just makes it a little bit easier, especially for us when we were doing some of our more dramatic stuff. It kind of keeps you on your toes because you're like, okay, I don't know exactly what direction this is going to go into because the characters a couple of times have been like almost serious, and then someone
right?
has totally thrown a left like a just a curveball at them. But Grant and I, with our rapport and our senses of humor, we really just wanted the movie to be a good time. And we wanted people to like watch it and be like, oh, the mystery was fun. There were a couple times where I was really on the edge of my seat, but also that they were like, just thought it was a riot. And they were like, oh, this is a classic, just like romp through an old neo-noir mystery that we hadn't really seen before. Um, so we were definitely intentionally trying to be as funny as we possibly could while having that underline of actual tension from the suspense and mystery of the whole piece. And I don't know if the humor is for everyone. I definitely won't say that it's like this is a universally funny movie, but I think if you do lean into the comedy and you just accept that you're on this kind of like roller coaster of tension versus just comedy, you will enjoy the movie. and like the characters a little bit more than maybe you would have otherwise, because they're funny and they do a great job just being humorous and entertaining the entire time.
Totally, I totally agree. Like I just and then I think lastly, this is for my. I was also curious about this. Like I loved the introduction of the film was pitch perfect. Like most of the when you looking at I've been in the last few weeks watching some older films too.
Mhm.
Older films of the 1940s and 50s when they when it comes on, there's like the credits. There's like this credits come on. So the whole credit sequence before you actually get into the story.
Yeah.
Thought was the like I don't know how was was there film noir inspirations in terms of the like the crafting of what the intro was, or that was just more of a just as a result of just the how do we want to introduce this before we get into the
Yeah, it was actually I really wanted the movie to be kind of sleepy at the beginning. You're just like,
yeah.
there's a chair, there's these guys that are having like a really boring conversation about just getting into kind of like, a night shift job. And if you when you work night shift jobs, there's not a lot that goes on most of the time. So, but really my inspiration, it wasn't a noir murder mystery, but it was Funny Games, the Michael Haneke
Oh
film.
yeah, Michael, yeah,
Yeah, and the opening of the Michael Haneke film
yeah.
is they're listening to old, just like classical music, and they're guessing what it is, and you like really don't even see the actors' faces for a lot of it. And then once the title drops, there's that metal song, just like there is in Shift. And in a lot of the early cuts, we had the same thing. But what we wanted to do, talking about like intention of tone, was I mean, try to tell people that you were in good hands and we knew what we were doing and we wanted you to be like, you're just going to be uneven for a lot of this movie. So like, it's going to be funny, it's going to be suspenseful, and sometimes it will be both. It's just make sure that you're comfortable getting into it. And that song is divisive because not everyone is attracted to metal music, but it's our way of just trying to like put our little stamp on it and be like, we know what we're doing and this is what it's going to be for the rest of the time. So like,
Yeah.
just prepare yourself for
It also
shift.
wakes you up too, like you mentioned, wanting the first parts of it to feel sleepy because you do sort of feel lulled into this
Hmm.
this comfort a little bit, and like it's like you're sitting in Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly's in an older chair. She can see she's worn a bit. It's like she feels
Yeah.
like the comfort in sitting in that chair, and then
Right.
that song comes on. You're like, whoa, what's the? Oh, okay. You're
Yeah.
like, you're just
Yeah.
like,
Do I have to be paying attention to this? Yeah. And I like, we also just really like, I really like those kind of credit sequence. I think they're cool and people don't do a lot of them anymore. They're just like
no,
fun
yeah,
and
they're
old
so
school.
rare. Yeah, they're so rare
Yeah.
these days in
Right.
movies. They usually just get into which is there's a there's time and place for that kind of. There's something cool about just getting straight into a story, but also
Hmm.
that feels like there is a bit of a this sort of element of a bygone era, like a throwback to this type of like, hey, we're going to take our time and lead you into this story, which I think is
Yeah.
perfect for like a mystery type of thing. You're being led into this to something,
Yeah.
and you right, you do want to feel like if you're coming into that the filmmakers have an understanding of what they're doing, and that they hey, we're going to take you on this
Yeah.
journey, and it
Yeah.
feels yeah, it's
And we didn't want to shy from being divisive. In a lot of ways, like a lot of this was our first movies in certain capacities. I work as a producer. Grant is an editor, but this was his first film that he edited. A couple of our producers, this was the first film that they produced. So like, there's a world that we don't get to make another movie together in the same way. And we were like, well, if we're gonna make a film, why don't we make it us and as interesting as we possibly can? Like some kind of a way, we were our own audience. And
yeah,
so when it works for us, then it's like, okay, well, it'll work for other people too, because there are other people that have the same, cinematic sensibilities that we do too.
totally.
And it was just a matter of trying to piece that together as much as we could. And it really came together in post. That was where a lot of the movie was like built and made.
Yeah. Oh no. It totally works. I'm definitely a fan, and I'm looking for. I'm going to go back. I would think I'll just. I know it's going to be premiering one more day. I think probably Sunday. I think Sunday's the last day. I think to catch it. I think I'll probably.
Yeah, we play Sunday at 4:40 at the California.
Because I'll be around. And I was like, I might just catch it again, just because it was like it was. I just yeah.
Come check it out. Say hello. Yeah, I'd
I
love to
definitely
say hi in
yeah.
person. We'll be
I
there.
I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm bouncing around catching different films and doing all
Of
this.
course.
To be like
Yeah.
that's just it's nice to sit down actually have a conversation about like what's next for Shift. You have other festivals lined up for it, or is this the
We're out to a few. There's a couple that I think that we've been talking to that we might be moving through. And then we're gonna look for distribution. That's kind of where we're
yeah
going.
yeah
So we're gonna try to get it out there in the best way that we can. Right now, we don't have anything in place. We had a couple offers that we passed on. So we're waiting to find the right people to take it out. Because like I've been saying, the taste of the movie is somewhat personal. So we want to make sure that whoever is going to distribute the movie has a similar vision of it that we do as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the things that I'm learning more about. It's like in the independent in the circle where the distribution is, it can take a while depending on
Yeah,
finding the right home for it. Like who's gonna like
right. Exactly.
and
We want the best shepherd that we can find, and we
yeah,
don't know who that is yet, but we're looking for sure. We want it to be seen by as many people as, we'll sit through that opening metal song,
yeah, yeah,
and then go from there.
yeah. Well, Max, thank you for taking the time, to sit and talk with me about shifts. I enjoyed it. I definitely looking forward to catching it again. Yeah, definitely I'll be out and I'll probably catch you and just to say hey in person. I had another scheduled interview thing like conflict. I wanted to do it in person, but I was like, okay, all right, I'll just do it on Zoom.
Oh
And
yeah, no problem. Yeah, this was great. Yeah.
this is great to just sit and talk and thank you for all the it's been cool to sort of nerd out about all the like the little about the stuff. So it's really cool. So thank you for the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon there. And I'll keep an eye out for you at the
Yeah, please do. I'm around the socials and everything all the time. So
so much fun. I was surprised we talked for as long as we did. My thanks to Hannah, Max's publicist, and again thanks to Max Neace for taking the time to sit down and talk with me about the film Shift. It was a fun ride, the film, and it was good to sort of get into the conversations about it. I had so many questions, and I was so inspired by the film, and so I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Come on back. The reviews of all these film festival films will be coming soon, as in the coming days, and so just be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, I've got work to do. I got to get out and get ready to catch this last day of events, and you'll see reviews about that too. So stay tuned. In the meantime, I'll catch you guys later. Have a good afternoon and be safe.